In the aftermath of Israel's incursion into Gaza, Amnesty International says there's evidence of war crimes by both sides during the fighting. Meanwhile, both Israel and Hamas are restricting the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Israel because it's concerned about arms smuggling, and Hamas because it wants more control over the aid. In Tuesday's Israeli elections, hardliners picked up seats in the parliament, indicating that whoever finally becomes prime minister will take a tougher stance on peace negotiations with the Palestinians. So where does all that leave the outlook for Middle East peace? Warren Clark is a former ambassador who is executive director of Churches for Middle East Peace. Jack Moline is the rabbi at Agudas Achim congregation in Alexandria, Virginia. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Rabbi Moline, what's the outlook?
It's a little hard to tell, Bob. It could be that this could be a huge opportunity in Israeli and Palestinian relationships. Any change in circumstance, I think, presents an opportunity, and I'm hoping this is one that both sides will take.
Why? Why is it a new opportunity?
The shift in government in Israel to a government that at least has support of an electorate.
With more hardliners in the government?
Well, you know, it's very interesting. The last two prime ministers of Israel campaigned on promises to take a harder line against Palestinian statehood, and both of them turned out being, by some standard at least, the most progressive prime ministers that there were. The withdrawal from Gaza and the proclamation by Olmert that an independent Palestinian state was desirable was a surprise to everybody.
So hardliners might be able to do more toward negotiating peace?
I think you say one thing to get into office, and you find out you have to do other things once you're there.
Ambassador, what's your sense of where we are?
I would say there's another opportunity, which is the new government here in the United States. We have a new president, a new Secretary of State. The president and the secretary have appointed a new Middle East envoy, Senator Mitchell. And I think that's new. For most of the Bush administration, there was not a forward-leaning U.S. government promoting peace between Israel and the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm. Although I'll tell you, one of the things that President Bush did that no other president was able to do was to call for a Palestinian state independent alongside of Israel. And I think another example of how that can happen.
But you think that's the only objective too, right? The two-state solution?
I'm afraid anything else is going to be much worse. If you're talking about continuation of the occupation or unilateral Israeli control, it's an invitation for endless conflict.
Mm-hmm. You know, decade after decade, American presidents, American people have tried to promote successful negotiations between Israel and its neighbors, and it never gets anywhere. And is there anything new that the new president or Senator Mitchell or anybody could think of that had not have been tried before that might lead to some kind of breakthrough? Jack?
I'm not sure that we can say that there's been no progress. There are qualitative differences between the relationships of Israelis and Palestinians now than there were 20, 25 years ago when the Israeli government prohibited its representatives from even speaking with representatives of the Palestinian nation. So progress is not happening at the rate we'd like to, and certainly the violence that's a result of that slow progress is something we all deplore. But I think that, as I said, any change is an opportunity, and we should go with the slow momentum.
Well, it certainly is that.
It is.
But I have another concern about the situation right now and how it's different, and that's the demographic situation. The population of the Palestinians is growing faster than that in Israel. And unless there is a two-state solution pretty soon, the opportunity is really going to be lost.
What about some kind of popular movement in the Middle East, here? What can American churches do? What can the American Jewish community do? What opportunities are for pressure coming up from the bottom that might change what the governments do? Ambassador?
I would say we need to continue the kind of communication and dialogue that goes on between the Christian community and the Jewish community. We try to do that here in Washington with Churches for Middle East Peace. I think there's a lot of ignorance in the United States about the tragedy in the Middle East, and that there are real opportunities for peace.
And I think you would find that within all of the American communities, Jewish, Christian, even the American Arab community, there are clusters of people who are working very hard on a variety of levels to find some resolution. You have people who are a little more liberal looking for cooperation, people a little harder to the right looking for a more militant solution. But the variety is there. The idea is to allow those voices to rise.
Quickly, Ambassador, you've said that the window is closing on opportunity, and I assume you mean by that that the Arab population is increasing so fast.
That's part of it. The other part of it is the Israeli settlements in the Palestinian territories continue to expand. They've never really stopped. Every president since Nixon has said they should stop. But there's been a greater expansion since the Annapolis conference a year ago than before.
But the bottom line for both of you is that there is still some chance.
Where there's life, there's hope.
It's not impossible.
Ambassador Warren Clark, Rabbi Jack Moline, many thanks.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
We're continuing our conversation with Rabbi Jack Moline and Ambassador Warren Clark. You were talking about the settlements in the West Bank. Let's continue with that.
I had just asked the ambassador when we broke away if he felt that the withdrawal from the settlements in the West Bank would have the desired effect on the situation in Gaza. And I was intrigued by what you said.
Yes, I said that expansion of the settlements is a necessary but not sufficient condition for progress, for peace.
The decline of the settlements rather than the expansions.
A stopping of the expansion,
right.
Yes. That is, it's hard to think of the creation of a Palestinian state if the settlements continue to expand because they are pushing out into the Palestinian territories, making it very hard to have a contiguous Palestinian state. So unless that expansion is frozen, stops, it's hard to think of the possibility of continuing forward with all the other very complicated issues that would come up in a peace negotiation.
And as an internal problem for Israel, it requires a significant shift in thinking within the Israeli population, because for many years after the Six-Day War, the people who were willing to go and settle the territories that were captured were considered the heroes of Israeli society. And now they're being depicted as the obstacles to peace. So it's a great dilemma to try to figure this situation out.
Of course, what we call the Middle East, the Israel-Palestinian situation, is part of a much larger
absolutely.
tension and complexity there. Maybe you talk about that a little bit. Iran, for instance.
Well, it's hard to talk about Iran and talk about its people and its government in the same breath. I think that there's a significant difference there. I think that the Israelis have been depicted by their surrounding neighbors as European interlopers and are seen as a blemish on the unity of that area. And I think with Iran and other states in the Middle East, presuming that they're the dominant force there, the Israelis therefore become the target of their desires and the object of their power plays. So I think it's correct that we need to address what's going on in Iran, what's going on in Saudi Arabia, what's going on in Egypt, in constructive ways before we can talk about a comprehensive peace in the Middle East.
I think the idea is that the way to peace may be by expanding the dialogue, expanding the negotiations. I was recently in southern Lebanon. Southern Lebanon is controlled by Hezbollah and another Shiite party. The Iranians are all over the place. You see big posters of Ayatollahs in southern Lebanon. Iran clearly has established itself a foothold in that part of the world, and that has to be addressed if there's going to be a comprehensive peace. And I think there probably cannot be a peace unless it's fairly comprehensive, until there's a huge buy-in by the countries of the region.
And I'm encouraged by the Saudis and the Egyptians and their continued insistence that there's a way out of this, although they've been very quiet and below the surface. I think they feel as threatened by the Iranians as the Israelis do.
And as you know, all of the Arab League countries agreed in principle to the idea of normal relations with Israel, provided that the 1967 borders or something very much like them were reestablished. And the Muslim countries agreed to much the same thing, and that included Iran.
There's also this idea that throughout the Muslim world, there's a sense of history kind of passing them by, that modern ideas are not as embedded there as they are in Israel, in Western Europe, and in this country. A sense of inferiority, perhaps.
I think that's a misconception. I think you have very progressive Muslim countries. Turkey, for example, Malaysia, Indonesia are all very progressive or industrializing countries. Turkey is even a candidate, or would like to be a candidate, for being a member of the European Union. So I think it's a mischaracterization to say that a civilization or a religion has a certain framework. Certainly there are problems of modernization, but I think it's a misconception to think that it's an obstacle that can't be overcome.
And without trying to be too controversial here, I think it fits an American agenda or an American ethos to make the presumption that we're dealing with Arabs who have been left behind. It is, I hesitate to use this word, but it's subtly racist in that regard. In the same way that the notion that Israel should be held to a higher or a different standard than other nations is subtly anti-Semitic. So when you have anti-Semitism on one side and racism on the other, it allows Western nations to feel a little bit superior to the whole thing and start proposing solutions they think any reasonable person would accept.
And that's an obstacle to settlement once you start with those kind of prejudices.
Right.
And you think the people doing this work on behalf of the United States understand that?
I think there's a growing realization that these problems are more complicated than we thought about them in the past.
Do you see, Jack, a possibility of Israel helping its neighbors develop educationally, in commerce and trade?
I have to say that probably the least attended aspect of the relationship between Israelis and Palestinians is that however slow that progress has been, as we talked about earlier, Israel's engagement with the Palestinian population has raised the standard of living from what it was before the occupation significantly. I'm not sure the Israelis can lay claim to do enough, but Israel's involved in a lot of places in the territories, and Israel is involved in a lot of places in the Arab and Muslim world that don't get publicity precisely because of the tensions. But Israel has the ability and the responsibility, I think.
After World War II in Western Europe, they figured out that if they could bring their trade together, they might not be fighting quite so much. Right. I'm just wondering whether anything like that might be possible.
Well, Shimon Peres has been proposing this for a long time, to create economies that are linked between the two countries, and he's now the president of Israel, so there's hope.
I think on the one side, if you travel through that area, the situation, the economic situation facing Palestinians is terrible. It's really a contradiction with this deeply impoverished group of people living right next to a very affluent group of people in Israel. And of course, the blockade the enforced around Gaza has also kind of enforced poverty and indeed a decrease in the standard of living drastically within Gaza. On the other hand, the promise of peace, the upside of peace, is considerable, and I think it's one of the great things that has not been emphasized, is that if this great dream can be realized of an accommodation and a peace agreement between Israel and its neighbors, the kind of economic, commercial, and other benefits potential is enormous.
The Palestinians and their diaspora have been as influential and positive in the countries that they have found themselves as the Jews in their diaspora. And the opportunity for these two peoples to work together in peace, I think, have limitless possibilities.
And they've got a lot in common.
Many thanks. Many thanks to Ambassador Warren Clark and to Rabbi Jack Moline.
Thanks.
Thank you.